Welcome back. W. Trotz will be joining us for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero on Thursday night. Michael's Cafe in Timonium. It's all brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lenders, and if you need some education about buying, selling, refinancing, or just thinking about things, Freedmont.com is there for you. They'll be with us on Thursday night, as will Cole Roofing. We all felt that March wind blowing in that storm earlier in the week. If you have a commercial roof space, make sure you reach to our friends at Cole Roofing. They are sponsoring all things There Goes My Hero and our Barry Trotz proceedings. We're calling it the opening day after party up in Timonium with the Capitals and Stanley Cup conversation with the coach. But then there is opening day, and opening day made a little brighter for anyone who is an Orioles fan by the signing of Alex Cobb earlier in the week. You got that first on the WNST Tech Service, all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Justin McGuire is our friend here, longtime Sporting News baseball editor, now doing podcast as well as still judging baseball books and writing about them and talking about them as well. You can find him, his beer. There's two there, one for him and one for you, because he's that kind of a guy down there in Asheville, North Carolina, as well, his glove and his ball at J. McGuire MLB. What's going on, man? I think for any Oriole fan, we're all a little shocked here that John is spending Mr. Angelos' money in this fashion so rapidly, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like they were going to really spend nothing this offseason. You know, Cashner was a cheap deal. Tillman was an exceptionally cheap deal. Rasmus was, a minor league deal, so that was nothing. So for them to go out and actually spend make a real free agent signing, one of the most significant that any team made, honestly, in terms of dollars, I was shocked, pleasantly shocked, because I think it's a good deal for them. I think Cobb is, once I saw the free agent list for last year, Cobb looked like the best fit for the Orioles. We know they needed help in the rotation, and if nothing else, he just gives you a major league arm that you can throw out there every 5 days, and they weren't guaranteed to have that before. So I like the signing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could all sit here and bellyache back in November, December, and January if they would have signed Alex Cobb for whatever the money would have been. And, things are not all equal in this offseason, and you and I have already discussed that twice this offseason, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that the next time the CBA comes up as well, with all things Tony Clark and onward and upward. But, all things being equal, and I know the baseball preview books came out a little early. I don't know how in the world you'd be able to do that in the modern era with the way this offseason went. But Cobb and Cashner, if you would have told me back on Thanksgiving Day that they were in the fold and they were going to move Machado over and play it through with him and go get him, I wouldn't have thought it's all that bad a plan. I mean, they had a kid come out last year and hit the cover off the ball, and they're expecting things out of him. They're still paying Davis and Trumbo to do that. They've got everybody walking on Cole, right, because everybody's going into an option year. So Jones needs to produce. Britton needs to get healthy and produce. Brock needs to be good. Buck needs to be good. Duquette wants to work again. So, everybody's dancing around, but somewhere in this, the Yankees and the Red Sox have gotten so much better in the offseason and are perceived as such that I think it's different. But if the Orioles were playing in the old National League Central or even the American League West, you'd feel pretty good about them going to post every day with a Major League Baseball team, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. This is not, I mean, we've seen some really bad major league teams in Baltimore. This isn't that. I mean, they have competent players at a lot of positions. They have a rotation that, well, it's still, it's still not going to be one of the best rotations in the league. It's probably still, clearly in the bottom half among American League rotations. It's not a horrible rotation, especially if you get Gossman and Bundy to take a step forward, which I think is entirely possible. I think Cobb could certainly be very good, and this is going to be his, really his first full year back from the Tommy John surgery. It's certainly possible that you're going to get production out of those three that you didn't get from anybody last year. It's like you said, I mean, it's tough being in that division. You've got those, the Yankees and the Red Sox, and they were good last year, and they both got better. Orioles aren't going to win the division. I think everybody recognizes that. But this second wild card does give them some hope. I mean, I'm not predicting that they're going to win a second wild card, but they're now one of those handful of teams that are in the mix for it, and that that's better than it looked in November.
Well, it's funny because I'm out on your Twitter, and I'm having a little fun with you right now in live real time because you tweeted out that the Orioles have a murderer's row in April, and I'm like, yeah, the things my guests realize right before they come on, they go do a little research, and they're like, they play who in April? Justin, I realized that like 3 days ago myself. I had not looked at the April schedule. By the way, with this Cobb deal, I've had a couple of Rays guests on, my buddy Andy Freed, Neil Solins as well, and I realized they open Red Sox, Yankees, Red Sox to start the year, but the Orioles is not much better. I mean, the April Orioles look it's a good thing they got Cashner, and how quickly can we get Cobb into the rotation, right?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Cobb, I mean, they're looking like mid-April for him before he's able to start. I mean, because he, obviously missed almost all of spring training. That April schedule, I hadn't really looked at it. I hadn't really been paying any attention until now. I looked at it because I'm doing this podcast, and so I'm thinking forward about like getting some guests to talk about the teams they're going to play. And I look at it. It's like, well, they start out with the Twins, all right. Well, then the Yankees, well, of course, and then you got the Astros, and then you got the Red Sox, and then there's like a 7-game stretch where they play at the Astros, and then at the Yankees for 7 straight games. So the two best teams in baseball, possibly, they'll be playing 7 games right out of the chute. They play the Red Sox, they play the Blue Jays, who should be pretty good. They do get a little break with the Tigers, but other than that, it is a tough schedule. And I mean, if they can emerge from April at 500 or a little below 500, I think they'd have to be happy with that.
Baseball historian Justin McGuire is my guest. You can find him out on Twitter. And, dude, tell everybody about your podcast because you're doing, like, Oriole programming every day. And give everybody your background, too, because just sort of a little introduction for people that may not know you as a longtime guest around here. You've got a long, lurid history with all things Orioles.
Yeah, I have been an Orioles fan since I was a child, which was a long time ago, in the 1970s. The first season that I really remember at all was 1977, when it was Brooks Robinson's last year, Eddie Murray's first year, as I always like to tell people. So, I went through the 79 World Series as a kid, and the 83 World Series as a teenager. I've been following them ever since from afar. I never actually lived in Baltimore, but I've been an Orioles fan for that whole time, and been through the good times and the many bad times as well. And that's, been part of my identity really my whole life. And it's something that I now that I'm not working for Sporting News anymore and I can be a little bit more out front with my fandom, I'm doing this podcast called Locked On Orioles, which is part of a network of podcasts that does NBA, NFL, and now it's branching into baseball. And it's going to be during the season. It'll be 4 or 5 times a week, and it's a short thing. The idea is for it to be a quick, just get you up to date on what's going on. So like 20 minutes or so probably every day. And we're going to have a lot of guests, talk about what's going on with the Orioles, look at season series coming up. We're going to have some fun with Orioles history probably and trivia and that sort of thing as well. So it's exciting. It's something I just started, and it's out there on iTunes, and it's out there on Google Play and all the places you can find podcasts.
Justin McGuire is our guest. You can find him on Twitter, as well as his 2 beers, Glove, Ball, and Pie Trainer, T205. Look there, out on the front of his Twitter at JMcGuire MLB. You mentioned Tillman, and I keep beefing with Lucas around here about, Tillman, well, they got him on the cheap. Well, what the hell did you expect? His ERA was 8. I look at it and think to myself, how in the world did they give him money, real money? And, I've seen nothing that makes me believe that he's a major league pitcher. And I know the notion that he was sort of counted on 3-4 weeks ago before they got into the Cashner Cobb business. It certainly feels better that he's as low down in the rotation as where he is, but they still threw a couple of $1 million at him that they weren't willing to throw at Miguel Gonzalez. And I guess go ahead and speak to that, and then I guess we'll speak to the larger picture of who's running the place right now, because, I'm into such things, and I ink books about such things, and witnessing it here. There's nothing normal about kids coming in free to Orioles games and spending $57 million on pitchers, or even $3 million on a guy with an ERA of 8, which struck me as a little bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, the Tillman thing, I think you can chalk that up to a certain degree, just desperation. They needed bodies to throw out into the rotation. He was somebody they were familiar with, had a relationship with already, and probably it was a feeling of, might as well give him another shot. Again, it's a 1-year cheap contract. I don't remember the exact number.
I like Lance Lynn at $13 million better than I like him at $300,000. Like literally, right?
Yeah, but is Lance Lynn willing to come to the American League East? That's the question. He's going to go and try to salvage his career by having a great year this year, and he's not going to be able to do that at Camden Yards facing the Red Sox and Yankees on the regular. So I don't know that they would have been able to get him, honestly. Tillman, on the other hand, didn't have a lot of options. But no, I see what you're saying. It's certainly not anything that inspires much confidence, and I frankly don't think he'll be much of anything this year. He'll be a fifth starter, and probably not even that at a certain point. He may lose a spot in rotation altogether for all we know. But yeah, I don't like the behind the scenes stuff. You know more about that stuff than I do, but it certainly seems like from what I'm seeing, it looks like John Angelos or the other I forget the other son's name, Lou, and then Brady Anderson seem to be the ones who are really doing everything these days. Brady Anderson has had his fingerprints over on all these deals they've done this offseason.
Brady Angelos, I like to call him. That's a new name around here for him. So exactly. You can use that in your podcast there if you want, Just.
I will do that.
Well,
he seems to have been, from what from the reporting we've seen, it seems that he was the one who really did all the work on the Cobb deal.
They're putting him out in front to make him the new guy running the place, make him look like he's the resident genius, I guess. It's pretty clear they've grabbed a hold of the old man's checkbook and letting kids in for free. Like, that's just something Peter G. Angelos never ever would have had a part of. And, I've heard here, like the president, I've been hearing things, but, I live here too, and I've witnessed all of this. It feels to me like Peter's made his last words, his last decision, that he has now been moved out, that we will never hear from Peter G. Angelos again in regard to how the team is being run or operated or Masson or players or any of, all the nonsense about not signing international players. That all came from Peter, where Buck and Dan are and all of that, and how the community gets courted again. This is a fascinating magic carpet ride that starts with Alex Cobb, because I'll tell you, Just, that kid came in here within 3-4 days. He's appeared everywhere except on my show, but he seems like a good guy. He seems like a guy I want his bobblehead. You know what I mean? He seems happy to be here somehow, some way.
Yeah, from what I'm sure, I know you said you've talked to some Rays guys, so I'm sure you've heard the same things. But yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about him as a person, as in terms of his work ethic, clubhouse presence, all that stuff. So I think that's in all those ways, it's a good deal for sure. The other Orioles players seem to be really on board with him being there. They seem to be very happy with it.
We like good players. You learn that, man. Even like the old 77 Yankees, they all hated each other, but they're like, Reggie hits home runs. We'll figure him out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can put up with a lot for a guy who helps you win. That's for sure.
But especially when you get a good dude. You know what I mean? Which obviously, this guy from he struck me right away as, wow, this is a classy guy. Good for them, good for him, good for the team, but this is not normal. This is not the way. And I guess the other part that really should concern everyone, is there a plan here, right? If the plan wasn't Lance Lynn 3 weeks ago, and the plan isn't Machado, and the plan was trading Machado off and trading Britton off, how is the plan all of a sudden to go give Cobb this money? None of this makes sense. It doesn't feel like they get together and have a blueprint. It feels like a wave that comes up on the beach that leaves behind Chris Davis for $130 million once in a while, Yeah,
that's been an issue with the Orioles for a while. You know better than anybody. There doesn't seem to ever be a master plan. I had a conversation with some people on my podcast. We were talking about this, and that's the thing that all the analysts, the national analyst types, say about the Orioles is, when you look at like what the Astros did or what the Cubs did, they had a plan and they stuck to it, right? Even though they knew it was going to be years of suffering in the case of the Astros, a few years of suffering in the case of the Cubs. They weren't the same plan, but they were plans. They put them in place, and they had the patience to live through the hard times. And that's what the Orioles have not done under Peter Angelos at any point, is had a plan, a long-term plan, and stuck to it. Everything seems to be made up as they go along. The Chris Davis deal was insane. There was no reason for them to do that with a team and then turn around and make no effort to re-sign Machado. It just doesn't make any sense. But I guess, Davis was a favorite of Angelos or something, right? I mean, who knows what exactly what transpired there?
Yeah, Brian Roberts is back in the booth again this year. He's one of their favorites, and I look, man, I'm all for the thing getting fixed, right? And I don't know how it gets fixed when the Yankees and the Red Sox are going to, outspend you 2-1. I don't know how it gets fixed when you owe the Nationals $300 million that's in dispute, that's now on its way toward $400 million of disputed money. The old man clearly isn't going to live long enough to see the end of that or fight long enough to see the end of that. And the Nationals are good, you know what I mean? And the Orioles don't have room to grow. The Ravens have that problem right now, just where they're having their PSL issues and all the reasons why the NFL didn't want to come here, which is 40 miles north of here is Aberdeen, and then they become Phillies fans, and 50 miles north of here is York and Lancaster, and that's where they become Phillies or Pirates fans. 30 miles south of here is Laurel, and that's all Nationals now. So there's not a lot of growth to how to get back to drawing 2.4 million people here and creating enthusiasm and excitement around the team. And letting kids in for free, that's cool and all, but it feels like it might be 20 years too late, quite frankly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the 800-pound gorilla, that it's the ultimately, I think there are questions, and I hate to say this, I just talked about how I've been an Orioles fan for 40 years, but I think there are, in my mind anyway, questions about the long-term viability of Major League Baseball in Baltimore for the reasons you just pointed out.
Here we go. Here we go. I mean, I made a joke the other day about the London Ravens too. You know what I mean? And
right.
That's what I was writing about 6 months ago. Here we go. I remember we didn't have a football team. I remember we didn't have a baseball stadium. I remember when the baseball team was owned by a guy in D.C. that didn't have a team, that, all during my childhood, the Orioles were destined to be playing in Washington, where the looting lawyers of Edward Bennett Williams and Larry Lucchino were going to steal the team off to Northern Virginia. I mean, I heard that forever. And here we are, 25 years later. We're trying to say, how are the Orioles going to be viable here 10 years from now without a television network that urinates out $200 million a year? Well, they're going to have to sell some tickets, probably. In the end, they're going to have to sell some tickets, and I don't know who that's to, honestly.
Yeah, it's a big problem. The Nationals, I mean, there's a reason the Orioles really fought to keep the Nationals out of that market, and we all know that. I mean, I lived in Northern Virginia for several years back in the 90s, and, everybody in the Washington area back then went to Orioles games. That was the thing you did. It was, all the companies had, corporate tickets, and some of the companies I worked for had tickets, and it was the thing to do. You'd go and go to Orioles games because the Camden Yards was still relatively new. The team was usually pretty good in those years. And now, of course, none of those people are coming because they have their own team right there in Washington. There's no reason to haul up to Baltimore. It's a pain in the butt to go from Northern Virginia to Baltimore, especially on a weeknight.
I do it the other way for, Caps games, Wolf Trap, going down to Strathmore, seeing a show, going to hockey games, whatever. I mean, I hear you. I mean, when you walk around Washington, the Orioles are a distant memory. They're only for old guys, you know what I mean, who sort of share that affinity. There's no thought, if you live in, Laurel, I want to run up and see an Orioles game. And especially when you talk about the Alex Cobb situation and where the kids are and where the old man is and where Brady is, we can't be, running the Bad News Bears out against an organization that continues to win 100 games every year down there. The Nationals aren't just there like the Senators were there or like the Expos are there. They're like good, and they're like, people dig them down there. You know what I mean? Like, that's sort of caught on down there amongst the young folk. And they're always going to draw better than the Orioles. They're always going to be the big gorilla in the marketplace, and that should worry everyone. But that's also one of the reasons why they can't just tank around here for 4 years, right? They don't want to become the Oakland A's, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, they're in a difficult situation for sure. Like you said, I mean, it's you don't want to. When the Astros were so bad for those years, I mean, their attendance wasn't good. Their TV ratings were horrible. And the Orioles, I know their TV ratings had been pretty good up till last year when they just cratered. I don't know. It's going to be a tough sell there. Like you said, it's just, if you can't draw from the Washington market, it's a limited market. It's a small market by baseball terms, and you're competing with, the two biggest, or two of the three. If you put the Dodgers in there, I mean the Cubs, it's certainly two of the teams that are always going to be at the top with the Yankees and Red Sox, and they're always going to have a huge fan base. I mean, maybe a realignment is ultimately the way for the Orioles to survive. Maybe they put them in a division with some other teams that have similar situations.
See, that was another thing where the old man never wanted that, right? Like, the Orioles could have demanded anything they wanted in 05. I mean, clearly they demanded all the money from the other franchise. Peter siphoned $2 billion off the top of this thing and the cable bill, and Lord knows whether the Nationals are ever going to get this $340 million that it's added up to now at this point. But, and Peter never wanted, and I guess that's the moral of the Peter principles and me writing all those chapters and being up all night and researching all the microfiche and, all the old Ken Rosenthal and Tim Kirchin and Buster Olney, Tom Keegan stories back in the 90s about all the maniacal stuff that went on with him and Steinbrenner and all that stuff is, all these years later, they haven't won and the Nationals still feel closer to winning. And I think that there's a real concern about what will become of all of this. And this is the year where things really transition, right? If Mr. A's no longer here and they're going to let a guy like Brady Anderson run the place who, I mean, no offense, but I mean, come on. I mean, and they couldn't hire anyone here. They couldn't hire a pitcher. And all of a sudden, they got a pitcher to, sign up. I mean, the monumental thing is that a legitimate top of school right-handed pitcher in the American League East signed up to come here and pitch for 4 years for any amount of money. In the old days, they had a hard time selling Confederate money around here. So if the times they are changing in that we're not going to go down, we're going to go fight another day because we need to compete for all of these reasons, well, then the fans here win to some degree, right? I mean, it beats where they were 10 years ago, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the future of the franchise is going to be determined, I think, in large part by what happens in the post-Peter Angelos era, right? I mean, when he's no longer, I mean, like you said, he looks like he's transitioned certainly out of day-to-day stuff, and maybe he transitioned out altogether. What happens next? Do the Suns, Brady Anderson, the people who are going to take over, do they have a plan? Do they stick to it? Do they build a team that can win for a number of years? I hate to keep going back, and everyone uses the example, the Astros. You don't have to do the exact same plan as the Astros. It may not, it's not going to work for everybody. But whatever you say about them, they had a plan, they stuck to it, and it ultimately ended up with them having a World Series winner and a team that looks like it's going to compete for several years to come. And they're a market, that's Houston's, a bigger market than Baltimore, but it's not necessarily a great baseball market. And the reason they're able to do this is because a lot of their players are still young and still, fairly affordable. And that's what the Orioles are going to have to do. They're never going to be able to compete on the big free agent signings with the Yankees and the Red Sox and teams like that. They're going to have to build with their own players and have a window when those players are still under team control. And that's really going to be the key to it. And the key to that is going to be, again, get a plan, stick to it, and hope that it works. And if they can do that and have a team in 5 years that's like the Astros is now, then maybe baseball can survive in Baltimore. But if they just keep going along treading water and not really being a force to be reckoned with in their own division at all, that I don't know. I don't know how it works long term.
Justin McGuire is doing all things Locked On Orioles in a daily podcast throughout the season. He's a longtime editor at Sporting News. Now, you can find him out at Locked On Orioles, also at Baseball Book Pod, where he talks to many baseball authors throughout the year about all things baseball and Orioles. You can also find him out on Twitter at JMcGuireMLB. This portion of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Pizza John's, my mom's favorite pizza, my wife's favorite pizza. I'm hankering a cheesesteak from down there. 50 years now they've been doing it at Back River Neck Road in Essex. Go see what all the fuss is about and make your belly happy. If you've never been over to Pizza John's in Essex, you are missing out. And all my East Side people are like, dude, you're making me hungry. Yeah, that's the whole goal. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. I'm sure you'll pass a couple Royal Farms on the way to Pizza John's as well. Stop by, gas up, use the app, download it, and you'll get some free Western fries, some free fried chicken. I got the 3-piece, 2 wings, a breast, and I got the Western fries with the roll on Monday night. Forget about it. Best fried chicken in the land. gas up, pick up some snacks, stop by Rofo Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Don't forget, head coach Barry Trotz joining us on Thursday night. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry, and there goes my hero. Last thing for you, baseball books. 'Tis the season. You're doing the book podcast. And any thoughts on some books, some ideas coming out? I know John Eisenberg's Streak. I had John on earlier in the week, and his book's still selling well. But baseball books, I need to read some more of them this summer.
Yeah, I mean, there's several new ones coming out. I've had a couple of them on already. One that a lot of people are talking about, if you're into the advanced analytics stuff, is a book called The Shift by Russell Carlton. He's a guy who writes for Baseball Prospectus. In fact, he did the Orioles preview in the Baseball Prospectus annual this year, and I had him on my other podcast to talk about that. But yeah, he has a book. It may be out already, but if not, it's certainly coming out soon. Like I said, it's called The Shift.
You had a Whitey Herzog thing, right? Like I'm a big Whitey fan because Whitey was one of the protagonists in my favorite all-time sports book, Seasons in Hell by Mike Shropshire. Yeah. That's my favorite all-time book. Anybody asks me about, I want to read a good sports book, I'm like, just go get Seasons in Hell. You'll laugh a lot,
Yeah, I actually had him on back in the fall, so to talk about Seasons in Hell. That was a lot of fun.
A legend, absolutely.
Yeah, it was great. What's fun about this is tracking some of these guys down because a lot of them are current authors. They're on Twitter or whatever. They're easy to find. But he's an older guy and he doesn't really have a web page or anything. But I did find a Facebook page for him and emailed him and heard back from his son and was able to arrange it that way. And he had never done a podcast before, and so that was a lot of fun to be able to get him out there to people. And like I said, the Whitey Herzog one that just came out is about how he rebuilt the Cardinals in the early '80s. And so, there's several coming. I'm actually drawing a blank on some of them right now, but there's always this time of year a lot of baseball books coming out.
Well, I appreciate your visits always. We're going to send everybody out to follow you at Baseball Book Pod as well as at Jay McGuire MLB for all things Orioles at Locked On Orioles. A pleasure, buckle up, as Bruce Springsteen says. It's a bumpy ride. We got 162 of them ahead, and we'll see how April goes for the time being. But for now, I'm all in on Alex Cobb. Sign me up. How about that?
Yeah, well, I am too, and let's just say that April will be the cruelest month for the Orioles this year.
Just survive, man. Just get me to May, and hopefully the Caps are still playing in May, and God gives me little green apples for the Preakness. That's all I'm asking for. See you, Justin. Be well, man. There he goes. Justin McGuire, J. McGuire, MLB. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore. I am in Orlando all week for all things NFL owners meetings. Make sure you're following out on social media as well. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.